Hello and welcome in to the Retirement Playbook, brought to you by Alspaugh Wealth Management. We are the retirement people, and we're here with you every week, bringing you some great information on this podcast. And if you haven't already, please, folks, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's Alspaugh Wealth Management. You can search that and see our podcast up there. So subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And as always, folks, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Tony Shore. Hello,
All
Tony.
right. All right, Brock. Wow. Folks, listeners, I apologize for Brock. He's had about 45 cups of coffee this morning.
And that's about right. Yeah.
So, Brock, I'm excited. A lot of craziness the past week or two here, couple of weeks. It's been a nonstop roller coaster of action. Between the Fed lowering the interest rates once again, the election.
Some small election thing going on, Yeah.
Yeah. Did you know that there was an election last week? Did you know about that? Because there was.
Wow, that's crazy, Tony. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, and it was very decisive. So the stock markets liked that.
Yes.
They liked the decisiveness of the victory.
No one wants to, have that stuff lingering around.
I was wrong. I'm the first to admit, totally wrong. I thought it'd be close. I thought it would drag on. And I think both sides thought that. Yeah.
I did too, Tony. I did too. So you were not alone in that, sir.
Oh, I know I wasn't. Conventional wisdom said this is going to be ugly, but it was just, it was.
It's one of those things too, Tony, where it's like, okay, well, half of the population is going to be somewhat kind of upset about, the results. Half the population is going to be happy about the results. And the bottom line is, when it comes to your money, no, none of it. I mean, it possibly could matter, right? The stock market has an initial reaction to Donald Trump and says, oh, hey, we're going to, this is going to be a great ride. And so here's the stock market, anticipation of some things going up. But the bottom line is this, keep your emotions out of your investing. Okay. We kind of talked about that last week. We kind of hit on that, but it doesn't matter if you're happy, you're really high about it, and, and all that, or if you're real low and kind of mad about it, it doesn't matter. You still have to invest money. You still have to stick with the fundamentals and not cash out because of what you think might happen, or invest more because you think the market is just going to. No, stay disciplined. Stick to the plan, folks. Stick to the plan.
There's going to be some fluctuation, and that with a transition, it's going to cause some fluctuations. People might get emotional, and that affects the market. Emotional investing affects the market more than a lot of things, right?
You're right.
I mean, people, oh, I'm selling. My person didn't get in, or I'm buying. So, but
it's bananas, Tony. It's bananas.
And what I find interesting is the Fed, it was a decisive win for Trump. Mm-hmm. The Fed lowered interest rates again the day after the election by only a quarter of a point, but they lowered them. And now today, the headline was inflation, the CPI index ticked up a little bit from 2.4 to 2.6. It's only 2 points, but that's going to fluctuate a bit. It's not crazy. So,
which is why they've reduced rates. You know what I mean? The reason for, the increase in rates was because inflation was just running wild. And so one way and one arrow that the Fed has in their quiver, it would be to increase interest rates to kind of slow demand down and kind of bring inflation down. And it has worked for the most part, Tony. Yeah. Now there's arguments on, when and how they should have done it, but the bottom line is it has worked. And so now that has kind of sustained itself in a manner that is acceptable on their terms, then they're saying, okay, well, let's kind of get to more of a normalized rate. Now, as of the recording of this right now, I mean, the 10-year Treasury, that's what the American consumer really is concerned about. If they're not, there should be, because that is what is the driver, folks. So the Fed funds rates is what they're reducing, right? That's what the day-to-day the banks work with. That has nothing to do with the things that you buy, the things that you are investing in. The 10-year Treasury, folks, is what it's all about, okay? And so that with the 10-year Treasury at a 4.4 rate is actually very healthy, Tony. And, we've talked about it in the last couple of years, having an inverted yield curve, right? Where your shorter term rates were paying higher at higher interest rates than some of your longer term. And what they use to determine if we have an inverted yield curve is the 2-year Treasury versus the 10-year. And for the last few years, I mean, it went on for like I said, 2 or 3 years. The 2-year was paying higher than the 10-year. That has finally changed. And so now what we have is what we call a normalization in the bond market, where your 10-year Treasury is at 4.4% and your 2 years at 4.2. That's normal.
Yeah, I had given up on the bond market. I'll be honest; it frustrated me too much. But now it's normalized and doing much better. So
yes,
I'm glad you pointed that out. I mean, for a while there, the old 60-40 rule that people used to use was not working because
of the 40.
Because of the bonds. So we're in more normal territory now, at least for now. But we see fluctuation with the inflation rates. We're going to see fluctuation with the markets, I'm sure, for a while, because they hit record highs, and there's usually adjustments. So let's not, like you said, I like what you say there, Brock. Don't panic, right?
Yeah, don't panic. Like,
in the immortal words of the great British author Douglas Adams, don't panic.
And not only that, but that's on the extreme side. I'm talking about the side of, man, you're so excited. Let's invest more. Let's deploy all of our cash. Forget about dollar cost averaging. Just dump it all. Don't do that. Okay, so it's on both sides, Tony. Don't get too excited. Don't get too high. And don't get too low. Stay level, folks, and stick to a plan that makes sense and that sticks and that adheres to the fundamentals of investing. Okay, base your plan and base your investment strategy on your risk tolerance. Okay, not what's going on in the market, who's getting elected. So that's very important. I want to touch on something real quick, Tony, though, with the bond market. Okay. I just had a conversation this morning with a couple of the bond experts that we work with here, and just kind of getting a feel for, we're starting to see this thing come to, form here as far as, President Trump and bringing in his cabinet members and those kinds of things. And what we're seeing in the bond market is more of again, the normalization of the yield curve. But more importantly, what we're looking at is, short-term rates, intermediate rates, and long-term rates make sense. But they're also, in an intermediate term, you're looking at, that 4 to 5% kind of rate on that. So, people, the reason I bring that up is because people still have quite a bit of money in stable value funds and high yield money markets at the bank and those kinds of things. One of the things that we've been talking to with clients and prospects about is the fact that, hey, these rates are coming down. You've already seen them come down through the 2 rate cuts that the Feds did. And again, it's not exactly correlated with the Fed funds rate, but money market rates do correlate with those, Tony. So as these rates come down and as the Federal Reserve reduces the Fed funds rates, you're going to see these short-term money markets come down very quickly as well. So I guess my point to saying that is that consider some alternative investments. Consider a bond ladder, in a particular case, and don't say, well, why would I lock in for 5 when I'm getting 5 or 4.5 in my money market? Because that rate's going to come down, and if you would lock in and get something at 5 or 5.5, that's going to obviously be better longer term. So the nice thing about that is you have a little bit higher, you lock it in. Plus, if rates do come down, those bond prices are going to do what? They're going to increase. So it provides a liquidity event potentially, that if you could, sell those bonds at a premium from what you bought them at. So anyway, there you go. I digress a little bit, but I just want to have a short conversation about kind of where the bond market is and where I think it's going and how it's relative to people and their money and you sitting on the sidelines. You might want to think about deploying it in a strategy, something like that. So, all right, Tony, this is fun. We're almost halfway through our show. We haven't even said what the topic is.
Well, we've been talking about some important financial changes in the financial climate and the markets, especially with bonds. It is some good news that bonds are changing, but again, you have to work with a financial professional. Don't try to figure all this out on your own. It isn't a DIY situation. It's a situation where you got to have a solid plan in place. So I encourage our listeners to give you a call, set up a consultation. But today, you're going to give us, in our remaining time, a few tips on how to reduce taxes on our retirement withdrawals. And people might say, well, I'm not in retirement. This subject isn't for me. Actually, the most important people it's for are people 50 and older. Everyone 50 and older needs to have a plan on retirement withdrawals, hopefully before you get to retirement. But even if you're already in retirement, this could help you. So what do we need to know about withdrawing money in retirement and how to avoid taxes?
Look, you're not going to avoid taxes, okay?
You're going to minimize the tax burden.
We're going to reduce your tax line.
There you go. Minimize the tax burden.
So here's the thing, Tony. Two things I'll say. One is, if you're not considering taxes, if you're not considering inflation in your retirement income plan, that is not a good thing, okay? You have to consider taxes and inflation and get what we call your net, which is, okay, how much disposable income after taxes and after inflation am I actually going to have? And especially important for forecasting out your income is, let's say it's 5-10 years away for you until you retire. That's really, really important, because then we can say, okay, well, you're going to need a little bit more money saved because you haven't considered these two things. So it's very, very important to consider taxes and inflation when it comes to your financial and really long-term income forecast. Okay?
So with taxes, a lot of our listeners are probably thinking, I'm not worried about taxes in retirement because I'm no longer working. But aren't taxes still, for a lot of people in retirement, their number one expense, their number one cost?
Taxes are, one of those things where, okay, well, how much of our Social Security is going to be taxed? Well, it depends on your income, okay? Yeah. So if we can provide income, to figure out how much of our Social Security is going to be taxable. For most of us, it's going to be 85% of your benefits are going to be taxable, okay? And that's not like the end of the world. Now, what rate is it taxed at? Well, it depends on how much ordinary income you have will determine what your tax rate is.
And you have to still have income in retirement to live on. People think I don't have income in retirement. Well, yeah, you do. You have to get money from somewhere, and you're probably going to end up paying taxes on it if it's from a traditional IRA or 401k, right?
Yeah, and then you have pensions, you have Social Security. These are all taxable events, right? These are taxable income sources that you would have. And then if you have outside investments like, rental income or farm income or something like that, and that all works together, folks. It all works together. So when it comes to taxes, what I want you to really focus on, okay, is understanding the difference between what tax table rate you're in or your monies fall into and your actual effective rate. That's very, very important to understand. Now, like a lot of things in the financial planning world, we're using assumptions. We're using what our current tax rates are. We don't know what our actual tax rate is going to be in retirement, but we have to have a baseline, okay? And so to have a baseline, you need to understand a very basic concept, and that is your effective tax rate. What the effective tax rate is, Tony, is you're basically averaging out what your total income is on your tax brackets. So we're at 0, we're at 12, we're at 22, and we're at 24. And then it goes up from there. But those are the four basic, the first categories. So, the first so much of your income is taxed at 12, and then 0, and then 12, and then 22 and 24. So if you average how much income, you might have some dollars in that 24, but your effective rate combined, it may be only 15, okay? So on a federal basis, and then you factor in your state taxes as well. But the point is that, oh my gosh, I'm in the 24% tax bracket. No, you're not. No, you're not, because you haven't averaged out all of your income to figure out exactly what your effective tax rate is. And that's really important, because the difference between 15 and 24 is huge, Tony. I mean, that's a 75% difference between the two when it actually comes to dollars. So, it's very important to understand that effective tax rate concept to get to exactly what we think it will be. Then you add in your, state tax. So maybe you're 5% for state. So you're at a total of 20. Okay. And the reason why that's so important to figure out is because when people are deciding at the end of their career whether they should do Roth contributions or traditional IRA contributions or 401k contributions, you have to do the analysis, understand that tax concept. And then you can develop a solution based on all of the proper information to whether you should do pre-tax, in the traditional route of saving in the 401k or IRA, or post-tax, which would be the Roth. Because if you're saying, okay, well, my effective tax rate's 15 or 10 or 12 or whatever the number is, are we willing to do that? In other words, do we have the tolerance? Do we have enough assets? Do we have enough income to say, okay, yeah, even paying 20% total in taxes, I can afford to do this. I can retire at the desired age. And so doing that analysis of the Roth versus the traditional, again, you have to understand that effective tax rate concept. The other thing is when it comes to penalties, when it comes to withdrawals from your retirement savings, okay, that's what we're, initially we're talking about here, which is, okay, now that we have this amount of money, how much income should I expect from that? And so when you're talking about income withdrawals from your portfolio, there are some rules out there that you shouldn't take more than 4% of your entire nest egg to make sure that you don't run out of money and to withstand markets that, that could go up and down and could be turbulent at times. So to withstand those, you want to stick with that kind of 4% rule. So taking out money out of your portfolio, taking Social Security, taking pension, all of these things, you have to understand your tax situation and then decide which way is going to be best for you. Maybe you've got some after-tax money, right, that you're going to withdraw from, Tony.
Yep.
And maybe you do that for a while to be able to do Roth conversions, and that way, you have less required minimum distributions.
Because with Roth, I mean, what people don't realize, what you're saying is a traditional 401k, a traditional IRA, which are the two most common forms of retirement accounts and retirement savings that people have. And they're tied to typically they're tied. There's investments within those. You put in money, it's invested in the market, and the goal is compounding interest. It'll grow over time. The problem is it's a joint account with Uncle Sam. And as Ed Slott always says, not only is it a joint account, but usually joint accounts like with a spouse are 50-50. Uncle Sam can change that number. Could be 20 today, and 2 years or when you retire, he could say, I'm going to take 50%. So you don't want all your eggs in that basket in those traditional accounts. You've got, I mean, a Roth IRA is your ticket out of that. Take advantage of the lower taxes. And maybe Trump will extend the tax cuts, so we'll have lower taxes for a bit. But at some point, they can't keep kicking the can down the road because of the U.S. debt and because of costs of things. So we all know eventually taxes will go up in one way or another.
Yeah, I tend to be in that boat too, Tony. I really do think the tax rates are going to go up at some point.
Right.
They're set to expire at the end of 2025. These rates we've been enjoying since 2017. But, like you mentioned, Trump has said that he was going to, possibly extend these tax cuts. So, but, like you said, too, it's got to come from somewhere. So, and the thing, going back to the traditional account balances of IRAs, because that's where most people still have a lot of their money. You don't realize it, or potentially realize it, but you do have to at some point. You can't keep kicking this can down the road, which is you've got to take money out of these IRAs at 73, okay? And that's going up to age 75 by the year 2033, by the way. So that keeps increasing, which is good for people. Now, again, this is what we call a first world problem kind of thing, right? Where you have to take money out of an account that you saved for, that you planned on taking distributions at some point. But planning for required minimum distributions is a real thing. Okay, that's like an actual strategy to say, okay, when we reach these ages, we're only taking this much because we have other buckets of money. But at this age, at 73, and again, climbing all the way up to 75 by 2033, you have to take an additional amount of money out. Okay. It's because there's a required minimum distribution that you have to take out, because you've never paid any taxes on this. And the government says it's time to pay the piper. So we got to pay these taxes on these withdrawals. So that's why I say and continue to say, Tony, there's so much that goes into this whole, income planning, financial planning. It's taxes, it's inflation, but it's how these things all work together and the different buckets of money, because I'm a huge advocate, by the way, of these different buckets of money. You shouldn't have just all of your money in a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA or a taxable bucket of money. Those are the three common, tools that are used. Yeah. But man, oh man, it's just a lot that goes into it. And you got to be prepared. You got to understand taxes and how it's going to affect your net income when you get to retirement.
Sure. So what are some other ways? I mean, you mentioned the Roth IRA.
Yeah.
What are some other ways to minimize that tax burden in retirement or plan ahead for that?
Planning ahead, I will tell you, Tony, and I have no qualms about admitting this and telling people what I do. And my wife, we do it ourselves, which is, we put money in our Roth 401ks. Okay. And then we get a match from the company. Right. And so that match is going to, roll up in our taxable bucket, or tax deferred bucket, I guess you could say. So that will be taxable to us in retirement. But another tool that we use, Tony, is overfunding our life insurance policy, a permanent life insurance policy. Overfunding it, minimal death benefits, so the cash can accumulate in there. I need death benefit anyway to protect my family. Okay, sure. So if you don't need that, this is not the strategy, because this is just an ancillary benefit. But the primary reason I bought these is because I need the death benefit. But if you can save money in a tool that allows you to accumulate tax deferred and then potentially tax free in retirement, why wouldn't you consider that?
So that's what they call a cash value life insurance policy. So cash value life insurance policies allow you to grow cash within them, compounding interest, and then that money can be used tax-free in retirement.
That's right. And you can do that a couple different ways, right? You can take your basis out. So that's a very unique thing only to life insurance policies, where you can take your actual basis out and leave the gain in the policy to help fund it for the rest of your life. Or you can just take loans. So they have what they call participating loans. I'm not going to get into all the details on this show, but you can take loans within the policy itself and the money stays invested. It's a pretty cool concept in the participating loan feature. So there's lots of ways to skin this cat, Tony. But if you don't talk to somebody and you don't understand what all your options are, you're not doing yourselves any favors.
A lot of strategies. I mean, the Roth 401k, the Roth IRA, cash value life insurance. These are all strategies for money to put in a tax-free bucket. So it grows tax-free. It comes out tax-free in retirement, especially the Roth. You don't have to pay even money on the growth. Your principal, the growth, it all comes out tax-free in a Roth. And you can get money tax-free out of the cash value life insurance policy. So there are strategies you utilize, but you look at all the different possibilities, don't you? Right?
I do.
For your clients.
Because if you're not looking at the complete picture and all of the opportunities that are out there, and that's one of the reasons why we pride ourselves on being independent, Tony. As an independent financial advisor, you have access to the tools that are all the full spectrum, I guess you could say, of tools that are out there and available for people to look at as far as a possibility of them investing in it. So, again, priding ourselves on being independent, that's one of the reasons why we can look at all these different strategies and understand that this whole entire universe is out there versus just maybe a narrower selection. So anyway, yes, we are available and we are willing to talk to you about what these solutions are at Alspaugh Wealth Management. Give us a call at 573-332-7855 or look us up on the web at alspaughwealthmanagement.com.
All right, Brock, great show today. Listeners, taxes in retirement are going to be one of your two biggest expenses in retirement. And the irony here is, before we go, I have to say, Brock, I'm glad you brought this up because people think Medicare is going to cover their healthcare costs, and they think because they're not working, they're hardly going to pay any taxes.
Right.
And every article I read, every survey, and investigative report on this topic says those are the two biggest expenses you're going to face in retirement.
Yeah. Healthcare, taxes, inflation.
Healthcare and taxes, and inflation is a huge one, especially as we saw in the last few years. So really work with a financial professional is the answer. Again, 573-332-7855 or Alspaugh wealthmanagement.com. Brock Alspaugh, you are a madman. A great show today. I love it. Listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of the Retirement Playbook with our host, Brock Alspaugh.